The Germans were losing the war. The Soviets were approaching Warsaw, and the Western Allies liberated French territory. After almost 5 years of German occupation, the hope of a quick regaining of freedom was revived in Polish hearts.
Przez 5 lat przygotowywana armia.
For 5 years, an army that had been prepared, demanding retaliation, in a situation where panic was seen among the Germans, could have taken uncoordinated actions on its own. The uprising would certainly have broken out anyway, because that was the mood in Warsaw.
I powstanie tak czy inaczej z pewnością by wybuchło, bo takie były nastroje w Warszawie.
The decision to start the Warsaw Uprising was made by the Commander-in-Chief of the Home Army, General Tadeusz Komorowski. The purpose of the uprising was clear: independent liberation of the capital, which was to be a bargaining chip in post-war negotiations that would save Poland from Soviet occupation. We hoped that on the one hand there would be a strike by the Red Army, and on the other hand the Home Army would step forward and liberate the city, take over and act here as Poland's legal, constitutional authority. The Warsaw Uprising was the most important element of Operation Storm, organised by the Home Army. The Warsaw Uprising is not the only uprising. The fact is that the Warsaw Uprising was the biggest battle of the uprising of 1944. In fact, we had an uprising in 1944 that started many months earlier, in Volhynia. After initial successes, one of the symbols of which was the capture of the Past building, German forces began to force the insurgents out of their positions. The Germans captured more districts. They took Ochota in 4 days or so. In Mokotów, however, these troops concentrated, defended, but Mokotów was separated from the city centre. There was not only one city centre, as it was divided into north and south. The Germans had a decisive advantage in armaments. Polish volunteers stood before a well-trained army such as the Wehrmacht, which was supported by criminals and murderers. Despite this, the insurgents fought bravely until the very end. At first there were very few weapons, but after a few days, as a result of the fact that several colleagues fell who were armed, I received a weapon, such a long machine gun, which was called Lightning. It was of our manufacture, that is, of underground production, and then they replaced my Lightning machine gun with a carabine. In reaction to the uprising, the Germans completely destroyed Warsaw. The German plunder was carried out on an unprecedented scale. There were specialized branches whose aim was to remove Polish cultural goods.
Warszawa została obrabowana.
Warsaw was robbed of literally everything. Even what was more valuable, marble and polished granite, were put on trains. I suspect that somewhere in Germany there are records to this day of what was exported. Poles know the bloody history of the Warsaw Uprising. However, in the West, often the only thing that is remembered is the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising.
Być może dojdziemy
Perhaps we
do
will come to
tego,
the point where the
że
uprising will
powstanie
also be
będzie
appreciated in common history
także
as the greatest uprising of the
dowartościowane
underground army under
w
German occupation. The uprising collapsed on the 2nd of October 1944 after 63 days of fighting alone. 50,000 insurgents took part in it, of whom 10,000 were killed and over 20,000 wounded. As a result of German crimes, approximately 200,000 civilians were killed. After the capitulation of Warsaw, the Germans deported several 100,000 people to a transit camp in Pruszków. In the following weeks, the capital of Poland was razed to the ground.